What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video. This time we're going to be discussing the Stamina Warden. The Stamina Warden does deal competitive DPS compared to other stamina classes out there, and they do kind of provide a little bit of uniqueness because they are kind of centered around providing good group buffs to the enemy, to the group. So Stamina Wardens are kind of in a awkward place right now where they do deal competitive DPS, but DKs have a much easier rotation and Stamina Nightblades do pull higher, so they're kind of not as desired in endgame vet trials groups. But that being said, they can pull toe-to-toe with even the best Stam DKs, so don't feel like you can't play a Stamina Warden because you don't see them being used very often in vet trials. They do pull very good DPS, but they just have a little bit of a learning curve behind them. Not quite as steep as the Stamina Nightblade, but there's still a learning curve nonetheless. So like our other build videos, we'll be going over gear, skills, alternatives for skills and gear, CP point distributions. We'll be talking about our rotations, kind of the mentality behind it, skill prioritizations, things like that. And then finally finishing things off with a 6 million dummy par so you guys can see what the sustain looks like on a Stamina Warden, as well as what the rotation looks like and what the mentality is as I do my rotation. So first things first, going to start off with gear. We are using two-piece Velidreth. I have a heavy shoulders with a health enchant, and that's just to get my health up to 17k. You want at least 17k health for vet trials, so you're going to want to hit that somehow using either a health enchant on your small pieces or putting attribute points into health. If you go all medium and you put all your attribute points into stamina and you're not an Imperial, it's actually impossible for you to hit 17k health. So some people are going with six medium armor pieces and one heavy armor piece in order to get to that health threshold. For our first set, we'll be using Night Mother's Gaze. That's one of our primary debuff sets. The other debuff sets that you could be asked to run include Sunderflame and Morag Tong. You will only be asked to use Morag Tong really if there's two Stam DKs in the group. If you only have one Stam DK, there's actually not much of a reason to run Morag Tong because the other stamina classes don't have as much poison damage. But if you are one of the lucky DPS that gets to run two damage sets, you can use Hunding's Rage instead, or you can go with Automaton because Stamina Wardens do have a decent amount of physical damage, which will pull it slightly ahead or match that of Hunding. So those are two damage options there, along with Vicious Ophidian if you want to use that as well. For our second set, we are using Vicious Ophidian. We have that on our jewelry and our weapons. So our jewelry, we have 3 weapon damage enchants. If you are Redguard, you don't need any additional regen because you will be doing heavy attacks on your front bar. The rotation that I'm going to show you guys does have 2 heavy attacks as opposed to the standard 3 heavy attacks that you see in most stamina DPS. So having the regen glyph if you're not a Redguard might be useful because you won't have the Adrenaline Rush passive. So kind of take that as you will. I would still recommend running 3 weapon damage glyphs even if you aren't a Redguard, because you will see a drop in DPS if you do replace one of these with a stamina regen glyph. And like I said, we're using Vicious Ophidian weapons. You can go with your second set. You can, for example, I could have used Night Mother's Gaze weapons. It's kind of up to you how you want to play it. Night Mother's Gaze and Hunding's are crafted sets, so it's easier to get weapons in the traits that you want with those 2 sets. So a lot of people do run Night Mother's Gaze or Hunding's weapons and then run their debuff set on their body. It's kind of up to you how you want to play it. I like having Vicious Ophidian on my dual wield bar, but again, it's kind of if you get lucky in trials with getting Vicious Ophidian drops. So you have Nirn with a poison damage enchant on your main hand, and for your offhand you have an infused weapon damage enchant. I have done a video already, you can find it in the theory crafting playlist, looking at dual wield traits and what combination of traits is best. So this is going to be the combination that pulls out the highest DPS. You can though play around with weapon traits. You can mix and match between infused, Nirn, precise, and sharpened as well. But if you are going to use Sharpen, do keep in mind you want to make sure you are not over-penetrating by going over the penetration cap of 18,200, because if you do go over that, then it ends up being a DPS loss. So I am using an axe and a dagger, but you can go with double daggers if you would like. Having the axe would give you a little bit higher single target damage because of that bleed, but having the dagger will increase your crit chance a little bit more. which helps boost your AoE damage as well. So you kind of can pick whichever one you want. It's mostly RNG unless you're using Night Mother's Gaze or Hunding's weapons. The DPS difference you're going to see between Axe and a Dagger and double daggers isn't going to be very large. For our back bar, we're using the Maelstrom Bow. Nirn honed, you can also go with precise or sharpened if you'd like. We are using Double Ravage Health poisons. That can be made using Fleshfly Larva, Nightshade, and Nirn Root. But if you don't want to use those poisons, then you can stick with the standard Absorb Stamina enchant, or you can go with a Disease Damage enchant. If you aren't using poisons, Infused does become a potential option. However, because Double Ravage Health poisons are fairly cheap to make, I would recommend just sticking with the poisons instead. So for our Monster Helm, if you don't have access to Cradle of Shadows, or you don't have a group nor to farm Cradle of Shadows in order to get Velidreth, you can go with some other Monster Helm sets. You can go with Stormfist, which comes from Tempest Islands. You can go with Selene's, which comes from Selene's Webs. You can go with Kra'gh, which comes from Fungal Grotto 1. And each of those has their own weaknesses. So, for example, Stormfist, it only procs on the boss, and if the boss is very mobile, you won't be able to get the full damage out of the proc. Selene, you need to be within melee range in order for the proc to deal damage, and Kra'gh has physical penetration as their one-piece effect, so you will, again, have to make sure you're not over-penetrating if you are wearing Kra'gh. So going over our attribute points, I have 64 points to the stamina, and that's because I do have that heavy piece with the health enchant. If I was running a medium shoulder with a stamina enchant, I'd probably move some points of the stamina into health in order to hit that 17k health threshold. It's particularly important for stamina because you don't have access to a shield, so it's nice to have a little bit more padding into your health, give up a little bit of DPS, just because dying is a much larger drop in your DPS than putting a few points to health will lose you. So it's much more important to stay alive. For our Mundus stone, we're going to be going with the Warrior. You can use the Lover for 4-man content and solo content like VMA or questing. And you can use it for 12-man content, but just like with Sharpened and Kra'gh, you kind of want to make sure you aren't over-penetrating if you are using the Lover. In a fully optimized raid group, when you have Night Mother, Sunder, Alkosh, and Infused Torok's Crusher, you will definitely over-penetrate with Lover. So you just want to do the math and figure out how much penetration you're sitting at when you have all your debuff sets up. And for food, we will be running max health, max stamina. This is the standard blue food. Now, I am a Redguard. Redguards are regarded as the best race for stamina DPS at this time. They get 9% regen, 10% stamina, and they get Adrenaline Rush, which gives them additional stamina every time they deal melee damage on a 5-second cooldown. So your sustain on a Redguard is pretty good, and it really helps out on a Warden because the way that I have my front bar set up and my rotation set up, you can't. There's going to be a lot of light weaving, so you won't be able to do as many heavy attacks in order to sustain yourself. So Redguards are going to be my recommendation for Wardens. But there are other races that you can use. For example, you can use Khajiits. They get max stam and stamina regen, plus they get 8% additional crit chance. So they don't get the Adrenaline Rush passive, but they do get some nice additional crit. Bosmer, the Wood Elves, also get max stamina and stamina regen, so they're another potential option as well. Imperials are a kind of an overlooked race for stamina DPS. They don't get as much stamina, they only get 5% max stamina and they get no stamina regen, but they do get 5% additional health, which helps out with your survivability, so you can go 7 medium and no points into health if you are using an Imperial. The downside is, though, you do have to have access to the Imperial upgrade in order to use Imperials, but that's another option as well. Now we're going to go over our skill bars. So this is the skill bars that I have set up, and this is what I found to pull good DPS. We have Blood Craze. You can use the other morph, which is Rending Slashes. Blood Craze does give you a nice heal over time, though. Subterranean Assault is the next ability. Deadly Cloak, Rearming Trap, and Bird of Prey. For our ultimate, we're using Flawless Dawnbreaker. This will not be our main damage ultimate. We're just have this there for the passive weapon damage boost. You get 5% from Flawless Dawnbreaker, plus 3% for having Dawnbreaker on your bar from the Fighter's Guild passive, so having Flawless Dawnbreaker gives us 8% additional weapon damage. Go to our back bar first. We have Razor Caltrops Poison Injection, Endless Hail, your staple stamina bow bar abilities. Then we have Green Lotus, Bull Netch, and Ballista. Ballista is going to be our primary damage ultimate here. Now, Green Lotus is there just to give yourself a little bit of additional healing, because you will heal every time you use a light or heavy attack. So that's really nice to have. It heals you or nearby allies, so that's always nice to have a little bit of an additional heal-in group. It also gives you major savagery as well. You should be getting that from potions, but if you are using Green Lotus, and additionally if you're using Netch, which gives you major brutality, you actually can get away with using just crafted Essence of Stamina potions, which only require 2 ingredients, or you can use your Essence of Stamina that you get from overworld content, but you don't get as great of a duration on your major endurance from trash potions, so that's something to keep in mind. Netch is obviously there for the stamina sustain. Now, Bird of Prey is there to maintain minor berserk. In some trials and some content you won't be able to get Comet Prayer all the time, so that's where Bird of Prey really becomes helpful there. It also gives us major endurance, which helps out our stamina regen, which really does make a difference there. So if you are running Bird of Prey with Green Lotus and Netch, you actually don't even need to use weapon power pots or any potions at all, really. I still recommend doing it, obviously, because you will get stamina return when you drink a potion, so that's always useful for sustain. But in reality, you can use something else besides your standard weapon damage pots. You can see if you can combine something like a potion that gives you stamina with a major resolve or major ward, for instance. That's a potential possibility, but the standard go-to is just to keep on using weapon damage pots. Those can be made with Blessed Thistle, Dragonthorn, and Wormwood. So now we're going to go over our CP point distribution. For our green CPs, 75 into Mooncalf, 75 into Nasty, 26 into Warlord, 26 into Tumbling, and 28 into Shadow Ward. You can kind of redistribute the other 80 points across the last 3 passes, whoever you'd like. I like just taking a balanced approach. For our blue CPs, I have 40 into Master at Arms, 61 into Thaumaturge, 61 into Precise Strikes, 19 into Piercing, and 49 into Mighty. Now, about Piercing, again, you kind of want to make sure you're hitting as close as you can to the penetration cap of 18,200. So this particular setup is optimized for my raid group, where we have Night Mother's Gaze, Sunderflame, Infused Torog's Crusher, Power of the Light. So those are the only 4 buffs that we get. We're not always going to get Alkosh. That's where I have 19 points into Piercing. So if you do need to take points out of Piercing, I would recommend taking them out of Master at Arms first, and then try to take them out of Thaumaturge, Precise Strikes. Try not to touch Mighty too much. If you need to take points out of Piercing and into the other nodes, put them into Mighty first. But remember that there are diminishing returns based on your how many CP points you're putting into each node. So I wouldn't recommend going above 56 for Mighty, or 61 for Thaumaturge and Precise Strike. Those are kind of where it starts getting a little bit more expensive to put CP points in to get to the next jump point. So those are kind of the numbers that I recommend you try to hit. For our red CPs, I have a one-size-fits-most situations set up here. Depending on the content you're running, you might need to redistribute accordingly. For example, in Hell Ra, where you're taking more physical damage, you might want to put more points into Hardy and take them out of Elemental Defender, but that's kind of based on what content you're running and how comfortable you are with the content. So for my one-size-fits-most scenario, I have 52 into Ironclad, 1 into Spell Shield, 1 into Medium Armor Focus, 48 into Thick Skin, and 64 into Hardy and Elemental Defender. So now with all that out of the way, we're going to talk about our rotation. So Stamina Wardens kind of have a unique ability in Subterranean Assault. It has a 3-second cast time, after which it bursts out. So that's you can count that as a dot, I suppose, or a ground dot with a 3-second duration, if you would like to think of it that way. Then obviously you have Hail, Poison Injection, Race of Caltrops, all those pretty much flow very easily together, and then you have Bird of Prey. So the problem is with Warden rotations is you want to maintain Subterranean Assault as best as you can, because it is a very powerful burst move. Which also does provide a nice cleave, so it hits multiple enemies, and it actually is the only multi-application of major fracture and major breach on any class, actually. So that's kind of where Stamina Wardens really shine. In trash fights, if you use Subterranean Assault and you hit everything in the trash pack, all those enemies that you hit have major fracture and major breach now, so the stamina wardens are really powerful for trash fights and really make a difference in DPS, so the tank doesn't have to run around and use pierce armor and everything. So for a rotation, before you begin any sort of parse or before any boss fight, obviously you want to buff up with Green Lotus and Bull Netch. Then you're going to start on your back bar. You're going to drink your potion, obviously. Then you're just going to want to light weave through between each ability on your back bar. Then you're going to use Ballista if it's up. Oh, I've already messed up my rotation. You can tell that I am not actually very fluent in this rotation just yet, so we'll just reset everything real quick. So, starting from our back bar again, gonna pre-buff. Now light weave twice, and then do 2 heavy attacks, and 2 light weaves, and then go back to your back bar and repeat. If you need to rebuff Green Lotus and Bull Netch, do that now. I already messed up that last rotation, so I'll do it again, this time correctly in the right order. Light weave, heavy weave, heavy weave, light weave, back to our back bar rotation. So light weave, heavy attack, light weave, light weave. So that's what the rotation looks like. Now as to where you want to fit in Ballista, you want to use that at the end of your back bar rotation. So for those of you guys who aren't aware, and you have a passive in the bow line called Hawkeye, which increases the damage done by bow abilities by 5% up to 5 times, so 25% boost when you have Hawkeye times 5. And so that's why you want to use it last on your back bar rotation, so that way you get the most out of Ballista. So if you are kind of doing your light weaves properly, you can get up to Hawkeye times 5 before you use Ballista. So if you have to rebuff, for example, Green Lotus or Bull Netch, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you do 5, and then you swap. So you can get up to Hawkeye times 5 before you use Ballista. So that's pretty important to do and to take note of. So that's why you really want to hit your light weaves on your back bar. So in terms of skill prioritizations, obviously you're going to want to keep Bull Netch up for the sustain there. And then all of your back bar dots are really big contributors to your DPS, especially Endless Hail and Razor Caltrops. So those are the 2 big abilities that you want to keep going. Poison Injection comes in as a 3rd, so if you need to drop it, then drop Poison Injection as well. You can also drop Green Lotus as well. That's just there for the heal. It's just there for utility purposes, so you don't actually need to keep it up at all times if you don't need to, especially if you're already using weapon power pots, so you already have major savagery from those pots. On your front bar, you definitely want to maintain Deadly Cloak, because that gives you 25% AoE mitigation. And then you want to see if you can keep up Rearming Trap. It's not essential, but Rearming Trap does give you Minor Force, which is a nice boost to your DPS. If you need to drop a dot because you have to break out of your rotation, drop Blood Craze or Rending Slashes, whichever morph you have. And Bird of Prey too. You don't necessarily need to keep that up because you do get Minor Berserk from Combat Prayer. Bird of Prey is just there in case you're running around a lot, for example in Asylum against St. Olms. That just helps maintain your Minor Berserk uptime. So now we're going to go ahead and get started with a 6 million dummy parse so you guys can kind of see what the sustain looks like on a Stamina Warden. I will try to narrate during the rotation to point out key things and kind of talk you through the rotation a little bit. But like I said earlier, alluded to earlier, Stamina Warden is not a Stamina DPS class that I play very often. I actually don't even have one on my live server. On the live server, I just have one Warden, and that doubles as a tank, a healer, and a Magicka DPS. So I have never played Stamina Warden DPS on the live server. So do bear that in mind when we do look at our final parses. So one thing I want to make note of is Subterranean Assault does apply major fracture, so we will get a higher parse compared to, for example, a Stamina Sorc or a Stamina Templar who don't have major fracture. So do keep that in mind when you are comparing DPS numbers from the various classes. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with our parse. attack. Heavy attack. So, and light weave, heavy weave, heavy weave, light weave, light weave. We are getting a little bit of lag there. Just had a ping spike of 500. Unfortunately, I am getting a huge lag spike right now. I don't know why. Okay, looks like our ping is finally stabilized. So Wardens don't have an execute, so we will not be changing our rotation at all during our parse. So there we go. So our parse is probably going to be on the lower end because we did have that lag spike there that kind of ruined my weaving quite a bit actually. So do keep that in mind when we take a look at our combat metrics parse. But you can see there that the rotation is actually very static. It's actually not that bad. It's just a matter of being able to sustain yourself because you only really have time for 2 heavy attacks on your front bar as opposed to the 3 heavy attacks that you normally see on stamina DPS, so that's something you want to keep in mind, and which is why I really strongly recommend that you use Redguard if you want to make a stamina warden and use this rotation. No, I don't want to open my crown crates actually. I want to look at my combat metrics report. Alright, so here's our combat metrics report. We pulled 35.5k. Again, I would have pulled higher if I didn't have that lag spike in the middle, because that did kind of end up screwing around my rotation a little bit and my weaves. So you can probably say 36k would probably be closer, 36.5k would probably be closer to what you would pull. I would be able to pull on a Stamina Warden. So that's pretty comparable to most other Stamina DPS classes, especially if you consider we're using Night Mother's Gaze and not something like Sunderflame or Two-Fanged Snake. So Stamina Wardens do pull, like I said earlier, toe-to-toe with most of the other Stamina DPS classes. Looking at our abilities though, you can see here, Endless Hail Razor Caltrops again. Number 1 and number 2, it's pretty much going to be the same across the board for all Stamina DPS. These two are going to be the dots that you always want to make sure you have running. Then Subterranean Assault, you can see here, has very nice burst damage here. It hits, the average was 18k and it managed to crit up to 27.4k. So that's kind of the strength behind Subterranean Assault. It's very, very powerful. Then comes Poison Injection and Light Attack, Ballista, and so on and so forth. So you can see here, Blade Cloak, Blood Craze, and Rearming Trap don't really do that much DPS comparatively to the other abilities up here, but they provide some nice utility nonetheless. So Rearming Trap gives us the Minor Force, and Blade Cloak gives us the damage mitigation. So if you need to break out of your rotation to res somebody or play a mechanic, and you need to drop a dot, just drop Blood Craze entirely, that's not really going to make or break your DPS. So that's it there. You can see here our poisons combined do help out a little bit. Almost 5% of our DPS came from our poisons. So that's always nice to have. So that's pretty much it for this video. Hope you guys found it informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.